Hello, everyone, and welcome to Politics' first ever election eve debate. My name is Becton, and I'll be your host tonight. We have two very special guests joining us who are both passionate about their presidential candidates, and they're eager to share with you why with you. But first, I wanted to tell you all about us. Politics was an idea dreamed up by two students in college who loved video as a political medium, but hated cable news and felt no sense of community on big streaming platforms, yet lots of toxicity. We've created the next generation political engagement platform, one designed to tackle the big problems facing political discussion today. Through live video, our mission is to reduce partisanship, promote real dialogue, and frankly, bring the fun back to politics. We're in beta now, launching with a scheduled cast of creators during the weeknights and weekend. We'll be continuing to expand and adding great new features throughout the winter, so come join us. But enough about us, let's meet the creators who we're debating tonight. First up is Socrates. If you don't mind, go ahead and introduce yourself to the audience, please.
Hi, Becton, thank you so much for welcoming me on. I think this is the first debate that I'm doing hosted by Politics TV. So I'm excited. I've been streaming on Twitch for, 4 years. Started in the pandemic during my PhD, and haven't looked back since. So on my stream, I talk about philosophy, politics, science. I work in the field of cancer research. I love politics. That's all been kind of self-taught, just reading books, watching videos. So excited to be here, excited to be talking before the election. Anybody who's undecided, you're tuning into the right spot. So happy to hear what my debate discussion partner is going to say. And yeah, let's kick it off.
Awesome, Socrates. Thank you so much for joining. We're glad to have you as well. Next up, Matt. If you don't mind, give us a quick introduction about yourself.
Yeah, what's up? I'm happy to be here as well. I'm glad that I was invited here into politics and debate, especially when we're 2 days away from the election. And yeah, I've been debating people probably for 3 years now. I started off debating, I think, vegans when I was probably 15. I'm only 18 now. I'm still in high school. And a lot of people have said that I'm a decent right-wing debater. So I'm happy to debate my woke partner here and see why he's voting for Kamala Harris. I'm also interested in philosophy, debating religion and politics. And I've been stuck up in debating people on geopolitics and people on the left who seem to have ideas they can't substantiate or defend. And it's going to seem really interesting. Excited.
Awesome. Thank you so much to you both. Before we start, I want to give everyone a quick preview of our format for tonight. This is a debate about who is a better candidate for president, Donald Trump or Kamala Harris. We're going to begin with opening statements from the arguments for each side from each of our creators, and then we'll have 4 broader topics we'll delve into. Each one will have a short introduction and then a question for each creator, where they each have 2 minutes to give their viewpoints to the same question for each creator. Next, we'll give each of them a chance in turn to offer a response for 1 minute. After we cover all of the topics, each of them will be able to make a closing statement. Most excitedly, our audience will be able to vote on who presented the most compelling arguments for their candidate. And a reminder to both of our candidates, we're debating the ideas and the presidential candidates. We're going to refrain from personal attacks and pejorative statements. We want to have a good debate and a spirited debate, but we want to keep it civil as well. So without further ado, let's get into the opening statements. Matt, we're going to have you go up first.
Great. Yeah, so we have 2 politicians right now who are running for the U.S. presidency. We have one Kamala Harris and we have one Donald Trump. When I look at both candidates, I look at their track record. People say that Donald Trump is dangerous in terms of being president, and we look at his presidency. Most Americans could afford groceries. Most Americans were not in fear of war, and most Americans felt safe when it came to border security in almost every sense. So I believe that in terms of a posteriori knowledge, acknowledging what we did have under Donald Trump, it was a much safer world, and we were less involved in wars. I think in terms of prices and energy production, I think those were on par as well. I think our relations in terms of the Middle East, Abraham Accords, in terms of Russia and Ukraine, making sure we keep Russia away from invading Ukraine. I think all of those things are really good. It seems like in terms of geopolitics, I value realism, and liberals value geopolitical liberalism. And as I look to Russia and Ukraine, when I look to Israel and Palestine, everything has gotten worse under the Biden-Harris administration. The Biden-Harris administration has not even thought to call up Putin and speak to him. They've only decided to take one side and not acknowledge any other person's side, which seems to me pretty bad in terms of trying to solve things or get to a resolution of things, in which I don't believe they have a decent solution for either problems currently happening. That's why we've seen a Muslim endorsement for Donald Trump in Michigan, where the majority of the population, or they have the largest Muslim population. In terms of why I would vote for Donald Trump, I believe that he's better in terms of geopolitics. I believe that he's better domestically. I believe that he has a better economic plan that's been shown to be true by economists at the Tax Foundation, which is a preliminary analysis on both economic plans. So in terms of wages, in terms of full-time equivalent jobs, in terms of long-run GDP, Donald Trump is shown to be better than Kamala Harris, and that can also be sourced. And I also believe that Kamala Harris is incompetent. She doesn't seem to answer questions. Every single time she is asked a tough question, she talks about how she grew up in a middle-class family. I believe that she is likely one of the most unintelligent Democratic candidates that's been brought up. And I don't think that people are excited to vote for her, which is why she's down in the majority of the polls. So I think that understanding Kamala Harris and her rhetoric and what she's done, which is practically nothing, a person who ran for president in 2020 and called Joe Biden a racist, essentially, on the debate stage, to someone who was then propped up by Joe Biden because he wanted to have someone like Kamala Harris be his running mate. So I believe that she's relatively unqualified, and I don't see the reasons why she would be better like a candidate like Donald Trump, who kept our country safe and kept geopolitics at a decent ease for most Americans, in which most Americans, like they've also said on polls, keep the grocery prices down. That's what he objectively did. Most Americans say that the Biden-Harris administration has had a negative impact in terms of their policies on the American people, which is not a good look, which is right. But Joe Biden's approval ratings have been a lot worse. So why should we take the candidate who did worse than Joe Biden in the 2020 campaign and that fell out very, very easily? No good reason.
Thank you for that, Matt. And next, Socrates, you're up to give your opening statement.
Thank you for that. Yeah, I mean, if we want to talk about what VPs for current candidates have said, I mean, JD Vance said that Trump might be America's next Hitler, which is pretty damning. I don't know why we would want to bring that into the conversation. But if we want to look at a broad level, the difference between Trump and Kamala as a candidate and Kamala as VP, Trump is weak. He's unable to just tackle issues head on. So if you look at the biggest issues that these candidates have had to deal with during their time in office, with Trump, I would say COVID is probably the main thing that we think about during his term. And when COVID was starting, he said it's not going to be a big deal. When it was happening, he said, don't worry, it's not really going to be a thing. And we're still just barely recovering from the effects of COVID, the damage to our supply chain that wasn't managed, all the people who died from COVID. People like to pretend that somehow COVID wasn't real and we're living this reality where people don't want to work. A lot of people died during COVID because there was really no leadership at all. And he's trying to chime in when it comes to what we should do with Russia and just say, just give them whatever they want. Well, the fact is Ukraine is a sovereign state. Russia is a foreign nation that is attempting to conquer it. And all free people of the world should oppose that. And we thought that Russia was going to roll in and take Kiev in a couple of weeks. And they're being pushed back. Now there's offensives even into the Russian borders to destroy military apparatus there. So it's been very effective, the leadership that Biden and Kamala supporting him have had. But looking forward to the future, what are these candidates actually trying to do? So Trump, in his term, cut taxes for people who were doing fine. He cut taxes for people who were making millions or billions of dollars. Kamala's plan is to cut taxes for people in the middle and lower classes, people who actually could use a tax break, people who will use the money they get from that tax break and reinvest in it in the economy. Because somebody who is spending the money they have to take care of their family, to do kind of normal people stuff, they spend that money goes into businesses, and those businesses grow. So that's economically stimulative versus just dismantling everything. Trump's leadership was basically just hiring corporate lobbyists like Betsy DeVos, whose family was making billions off of dismantling the public educational system. So Donald Trump is just destroying, while Kamala Harris and Biden, as the president in their term together, have been building. They passed the infrastructure bill that has been, I think, the biggest infrastructure bill maybe since the New Deal. So we've been rebuilding roads, bridges, even internet infrastructure, things that in the 21st century we just need to function in our country. We can't have just no infrastructure that's crumbling. And this also creates a lot of jobs. Speaking of creating jobs, Kamala Harris is focused on building small businesses, because small businesses, as much as Trump loves multinational corporations that have no allegiance to the United States, it's actually small businesses that are the backbone of America. So she's expanding the tax credit for startups from $5,000 to $50,000. I think that's a pretty big impact. This is the kind of thing that keeps our country kind of like vital, actually gets people in the entrepreneurship spirit and able to make those good ideas into something tangible that can actually grow the economy. And at the same time,
Awesome.
am I running out of time? Just one more point, which is
You
just
have 3 minutes, so finish real quick.
I care a lot about housing. I'd like to buy a house someday. Kamala Harris has a plan to give people $25,000 toward buying their first house, which I think is a really good idea. Thank you.
All right. Thank you both for those. You both made some good points about both of our candidates. Now, we're going to move into some of the actual issues that we're going to be talking about tonight. We have 4 Big Ten issues that we're going to be talking about. And in fact, as you just mentioned, housing is actually going to be our first one. So in America, housing and its affordability has now become a significant political issue. Over half of all renters spend more than 30% of their annual income on rent, according to Pew Research. And in 2022, the median list price of homes nationwide surpassed what a median income household can afford, and it's only deteriorated further since. Kamala Harris and Donald Trump have both said that they agree that housing is too expensive, but their plans to fix it differ. We'll go ahead and start with Matt. Why do you think that Donald Trump will better ease the housing affordability crisis? You have 2 minutes.
Great, thank you. Before I touch upon what Donald Trump might do about housing, I first want to touch upon what my opponent there said. He said that Harris has a plan on housing, which has actually been reviewed by economists, who have also said that her plan on housing is going to make the issue worse. So here in America, we understand with decent free market understanding that housing is a supply and demand issue, right? So it's a two-way street and a two-way issue. In terms of just giving people money so they can buy a house, in terms of having a supply issue, is going to actually increase prices, according to most economists who have reviewed her plan. So giving everyone $25,000 or to new home buyers is going to make the situation a lot worse. The actual fix, or the plan to fix housing here in the United States, is to allocate more resources and for governments to spur up small businesses in the Midwest, where there is not a lot of people. So, for example, if you buy a house in New York, it's going to cost a lot more than if you buy a house in the Midwest. Why? Because people live there. It's simple supply and demand, and also simply where the metropolitan areas are, right? Which is why housing in more Midwestern areas are more probably affordable than in like the East or the West necessarily, which is why we had the Homestead Act, which actually allocated resources to people who wanted to move to the West in the late 1800s, because we knew that allocating those resources would better help a lot of people and also give incentives for people to move there and spur up businesses. So that's, I think, the biggest plan. I think that Kamala Harris has is going to have a negative effect in terms of housing.
Okay. Oh, still muted.
All right. Thank you, Matt. Next, we're going to let Socrates have 2 minutes to discuss why he thinks Kamala Harris will be better on the housing affordability issue.
Okay. So I know these are short rounds, so I'll try to get through it, but I'll just note that my opponent didn't say anything about Donald Trump having any plan, even concepts of a plan. But he said something vaguely about how Kamala's plan will be bad, because I was just talking about the increasing the purchasing power for buyers, but not the supply side. So just the demand, but not the supply. Paired with the first-time homebuyer tax credit, she's also including a tax credit for people to build houses for first-time home buyers, and especially for affordable housing. So this includes the expansion of a program that will provide 1.2 million new affordable homes. There were programs as part of the American Rescue Plan Act that she was the deciding vote on that was actually converting a lot of vacant homes or vacant buildings into usable apartments. So this is a big issue. We have a lot of apartments, or we have a lot of buildings that might be businesses. A lot of industry buildings were built that were not being used. They were overproduced, and now they need to be converted into housing to be usable. But that's a very expensive prospect for companies to take on. This is something where some kind of government intervention to give a tax credit to turn these vacant buildings into housing can provide a huge number of new units, which will actually increase the supply. So I would love to hear what the problem is with increasing the supply and demand side to make it so that people who want to buy homes can actually buy homes and build some equity and have some stability in their lives. Seems like a good idea to me. I'd like to hear the alternative, or why that's a problem. And I'll yield whatever. Final time.
Oh, you're good, Socrates. Thanks. And Matt, you have a chance to respond to him. And I know you didn't use all your time on the first one. So if you'd like to have that extra minute to talk a little bit more about Donald Trump's plans, feel free. You've got 2 minutes.
Appreciate it. I find it interesting that my opponent mentioned that the whole 3 million new homes thing, which she can't get a mandate for. I don't know which state is going to give her that mandate. It almost seems, well, it was 3 million new homes that was actually brought up. Just saying, I actually read the thing. It said 3 million new homes that she wants to actually build. You can Google that as well, because I did see that you were Googling other stuff during the debate. So it's very interesting, because the 3 million new homes that she's supposed to build, she needs a mandate for. And I don't know which state is going to just give up a 3 million new house mandate. So that's one of the other things that sound good, which in retrospect is not good. Which is why when Kamala Harris was like doing the CNN town hall, she was like, she had one of the guys come up and she was asked, like, how are you going to, like, you know, solve pricing in terms of like price gouging, your price gouging plan and stuff like that. And then the analyst also called out her plan, and he said very carefully, well, I actually read your plan and it's only for emergency cases. So how is it going to help someone out like Chris, right? Which it can't help it out, right? So the majority of like emergency cases might happen somewhere in like Florida or North Carolina, but it's not going to happen in like the majority of states. There's no like immediate emergency in terms of hurricane, and it's actually going to like fix the whole price issue, right? So price gouging in emergency cases is like useless to the general population. So in terms of 3 million new homes, it sounds good. But in retrospect, it's not going to happen, and there's no actual real incentive for any state to just give you 3 million new homes. So you might want to like Google that a little bit more in terms of that. But again, I think that giving more incentives to areas where there's not a lot of homes built is a great way. Giving incentives to businesses to build equity around those areas is also a good way. That's actually how Donald Trump's father, Fred Trump, got rich is he would go to areas which are not very rich, and he'd build like boutiques there and like restaurants, all sorts of things, and he'd actually spur up the wealth of that area. So I think things like that are a good way to give incentives for businesses and for people to actually move into areas and for actually to actually have home affordability. Now, the whole thing with 3 million new homes is kind of nonsense.
Thanks, Matt. Your time is just about up. And Socrates, if you'd like to give a response to Matt's response, you have 1 minute.
Is it possible to cede half of that to just hear what do you mean by mandate? Is that something I can do? Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So you don't just build homes. You don't just build homes. So when she's saying there's like this sort of federal plan to build homes, which state is going to give her that mandate? Because it's not just sporadic, right?
So my understanding is this is a tax credit. So this
we have states in the United States, right?
Yes. So this is a credit for people to build homes. Why would people?
Well, the credit is the $25,000.
No. This is a supply side credit.
Wait, what does that even mean? It doesn't even make any sense. I mean,
so it costs money for a construction project to build a home. If that home is going to be used for affordable housing, or some percent affordable housing, right? There's some regulations around it. Then you get a tax credit for building it, and then also people get a tax credit for buying it. So it's actually addressing both sides of it.
That seems like it's going to increase the deficit. When you give a lot of money around to people who can afford stuff, it's actually going to probably bring prices up for homes, and it's not going to solve the problem. Also, if you're talking about some sort of a federal plan, I think that's probably where all of the like communist memes came from. But in terms of like statewide, I don't know how that's going to be done statewide, or which state is going to accept that and stuff like that. So it seems pretty illogical and unreasonable to me.
So just addressing that in order, government spending increases the deficit. We can spend money on things that we like or things that are not useful, right? So it's not an argument against something to say that it'll increase the deficit. Of course, spending on literally everything increases the deficit. But I would rather increase spending to create a bunch of housing that we really need than to just give money to Goldman Sachs for stock buybacks, or some multinational corporation that gets some tax credit from the Trump tax bill. That's not going to anything targeted or useful, right? So it's not really an argument to say something is tax spending. And now going on to this argument around what state will want this, what do you mean? Every state wants more housing for their people. I mean, this is a program for people building housing. I'm actually not clear what you're talking about, that this has to do with like a state mandate.
Yeah, because things don't just work in the sense of like, we're going to build 3 million new homes in your state. There's also something called like federal land, which I'm pretty sure you might not be aware of. There's all sorts of things going on with all sorts of states that have all sorts of economies, that have all sorts of incentives. So you don't just come in and say, we're going to build 500,000 new homes here, and that's objectively what's going to happen, and we're going to give a shit ton of people money to buy homes. That's why most economists that have actually reviewed her plan, and most socialists who I've even spoken to, said that it's actually not a great idea. It seems good to the average like onlooker on that. Oh, you're going to give people money and they're going to be able to afford homes. But there's a supply and demand issue when we're talking about a free market in terms of capitalism. So giving everyone money to buy an item is likely going to increase the price of that item.
Okay.
Right?
If you give people money for building something or constructing something, we're talking about widgets. Let's say you say, I give you $5 to build this widget. Do you think more widgets will be built?
Wait, so are the constructors of it already make money? Are you telling me that people are getting?
They will make more money if they get some kind of federal tax credit, right?
So wait, hold on. So you're telling me that the constructors are now going to get like a $8,000 tax credit for building up a home, because people that build homes already work with companies who already pay them to build homes. So can you actually review your plan? It doesn't seem like you know what you're talking about, dude.
I don't. There's no reason for this to be antagonistic, right?
Now too?
Right. Yeah. So that's the plan, right? So it's supply side. The people building the homes get a tax credit if it's for affordable housing. That's the plan. Yeah.
Thanks, guys. You guys are just about out of time. We appreciate the spirited discussion, though. I would like to remind everyone that we want to keep this to the issues, and we want to avoid any personal attacks. Let's talk about the candidates more so. And speaking of spending in the deficits, let's move on to the economy. America's economy has been a hot button political issue in every recent election, but especially since the pandemic, both sides of the political spectrum tend to view the country's economic condition negatively. In fact, only 37% of Democrats and 10% of Republicans view the current economy as good or excellent, according to Pew Research. Both Donald Trump and Kamala Harris agree that the economy should be stronger, although their plans differ. Socrates, why do you think that Harris will better improve the American economy?
Right. So this is something I'm hoping we can find a little bit of agreement on, that there's kind of two fundamentally different things happening when we're talking about the economy, or the economy doing well or the economy doing poorly. There's like GDP, there's how much people are buying stocks, or how much the stock market is increasing in value, or how much multinational corporations that have some base here in the United States, or how much more money Walmart or Amazon is making. And then there's, as you were talking about earlier, things like people being able to buy groceries, or send their kids to school, or send their kids to childcare, being able to afford homes, being able to afford cars, being able to afford gas, basic things like that. Um, so I think I'm betting that we have some agreement that these are kind of different things that are felt differently, and are both probably important. I think you probably can't neglect either, but you do have to think about both. I was personally not a fan of the Donald Trump tax credit. That was his, I would say, biggest piece of legislation, that was skewed really, really heavily toward just generic tax cuts for people who are making, in the millions and billions of dollars, compared to the people who are kind of struggling to get by, or struggling to move up, just on a really basic level. I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on that, just to see where we're at. If I can see the rest of the time for now, we can figure out how to work that.
Sure, you have 30 more seconds to give to Matt.
Yeah.
Okay. Wait, so can I respond, or is that his turn? I don't know what's going on. Okay, great. Yeah, I think we can definitely agree there's something that's been wrong with the economy recently. In the recent years, people can't afford groceries, gas prices went up, and that's for a variety of issues. Definitely some issues in terms of foreign issues, in terms of like we have the Russian-Ukraine war, which affected not only like oil prices, but in general, like the global economy. And that was shown because we had projections for that year. They did up those projections, and that's across like the World Bank and across like everyone else, the UN. So there's definitely an issue there. Some of that can't be blamed in terms of like Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, but most Americans do say that Trump is better economically because they experienced a better economy under Donald Trump than under the Biden-Harris administration. So I think we can definitely agree there. In terms of the economy, I think looking at the tax foundation is probably a great way for us to check this out. The Tax Foundation did a preliminary analysis. It's very detailed, looking at every single plan that Donald Trump has and every single plan that Kamala Harris has, or at least has proposed, like the tax credits, like the tariffs, and all of that good stuff. And they've shown that long run GDP, Donald Trump is 0.8 plus. Long run wages, Donald Trump is 0.8 plus. Long run full time equivalent jobs, 597,000 added full time equivalent jobs. If you don't know what FTE means, essentially it's the full actual jobs, like actual full time jobs, not like the part time jobs. And it shows here for Kamala Harris, long run GDP is negative 2.0. Long run wages is negative 1.2%. And long run full time equivalent jobs is going to be negative 786,000. I don't know if we can post those tables. It'd be really, really great to. And just for some information, the Tax Foundation is a nonpartisan organization that does research on all sorts of those things. You also touched upon the rich and how they don't pay their fare. Well, I think most people who say like, oh, it just went into like all of the rich, they got all the tax credits and stuff. So when people make more money, they also like get taxed more. So when you get a tax cut, that tax cut is also more, right? So if someone makes like $10,000 a year, their tax cut right, is going to be probably a lot like less in comparison to someone who makes $500,000 a year. So more money physically, right? They get cut because they make more money, right? I don't know if that makes sense to you, but yeah. So, and also the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act did help businesses out a decent amount, but it also gave them incentives for bonuses and wages and promotions and all of those things, which also benefited people that are workers. The Tax Foundation also there was a 2008 study done. That also showed that increasing the corporate tax rate actually hurts people. So it actually hurts the workers, right? And does not hurt the business much because they'll kind of take that out on the workers. But when you actually give them a tax cut, they can afford to keep everything that they have. They can give people new jobs, new positions, all of those things, and it's less stress on the business, right? Simple capital.
Thank you, Matt. We gave you your whole 2 minutes into that because it sounded like you were on a roll. So, Socrates, if you'd like to offer a response, you have 60 seconds.
Sure. So just on a really basic level, I mean, we can talk about different broad level evaluations of plans, but just thinking about, okay, we have taxes that we collect from the population, and we spend that in whatever way we think is most effective for our country. I really think it's these talking points have never landed with me around, oh, well, they get taxed more, so they get more back in the credit. The different, progressive tax credit shelves or tax rate shelves that we have, those are arbitrary. Those are things that we set, that we think, if you make above this much, then your 400,000 and first dollar should be taxed at this rate, or your millionth dollar and first dollar, or your billionth dollar should be taxed at this rate. We can set that to whatever we want. So the idea that there's some issue in like physics in the world that we can't have a tax cut for just the middle class or just the working class, that's somehow impossible. That's never really resonated with me. For me, it makes a lot of sense that we spend the money that we get from taxes in targeted ways that are going to be useful for making our country a better place. So things like money for starting a new business that drives the economy, money for building a home that people need, and money for buying a home so that you can start building equity, and basic tax credits for families, so it's easier to start a family if we think we want more like workers in this nation. Those all seem like very sensible, targeted things. Why are those terrible ideas? Why is it terrible to incentivize those things?
Thank you, guys. Matt, if you want to respond, I'll give you a minute. We're going to have to keep times a little more strict now so we don't run over too much. Matt, go ahead.
Yeah, so he said why it's terrible. Well, it's not terrible. And Donald Trump and JD Vance also proposed a tax credit in terms of families, because I do believe, and a lot of conservatives are actually more pro-family, right? They tend to have more family, more kids and stuff like that. So we are also having a $5,000 tax credit, which is also going to be great for people who want to have children. Now, do you believe, just real quick, that people who pay 97% of all federal income taxes also deserve a tax break in the tax cuts? Just a question.
Okay, cool. No, I don't think that anybody just deserves something, that if you're rich, then you deserve to just have more money. I think that we should have a holistic view of our country, and we should want it to operate well, and we should be strategic with how we spend money, that we increase productivity and we make the country better for everybody. This idea that just, oh, you run Amazon, so you should just have more money because you already have money, it seems nonsensical to me.
So 97% of people don't run Amazon. And it's not that, I don't know what that whole thing about is, like they all run Amazon. I'm pretty sure Jeff Bezos is the CEO of Amazon. It's not everyone who's the CEO of Amazon. Yeah, but the top 50% of all taxpayers paid 97.7% of all federal individual income taxes. And the government makes its money usually through federal income taxes, right? By taxing the money that you make at your job. And so I believe that people that pay a lot of federal income taxes also deserve a tax break, in which they get larger ones because they make more money, right? So that's kind of how that works. And yeah, we do also want to incentivize families, which is why conservatives tend to have statistically better families and promote and have more kids and stuff like that also. I don't know why you're smirking.
Oh,
Move on. We've got a few more issues to get through. Climate change is a widely discussed policy issue on all sides of the political spectrum. Earth's atmospheric CO2 level has been increasing over the last few decades, but people differ in their views on the level of human causation and implications of that rise. Both candidates have addressed climate change and energy in varying degrees during their campaign. So, Socrates, why do you think Kamala's approach of tackling what you view as a pressing problem will be better for the country?
yeah. So first of all, just to explain, I was smirking at. I found it funny comment that conservatives have better families. Maybe that can be a topic for a next debate. But this is another topic where it feels like Trump is just weak and unable to face realities that are difficult. It's the fact that the climate crisis is no longer something that's like looming in the distance. This is something that now everyday people are just feeling. The number of hurricanes, the hottest year after year after year temperature on record. I mean, I live in an area that has always had a huge amount of snow, and this winter it's just like, we had like a 70, 80 degree day. It's very strange. Um, this is not a this is not a debatable issue that this is a problem. It's just a question of what are we going to do with it. We've heard for a really long time that, oh, the only possible way we could ever combat climate change is by just deindustrializing and shutting down the economy. And they all want us to just not drive our cars and all this stuff. We just have to have some kind of austerity response to this. That's ridiculous. We have been investing in green energy, but our obsession with just a kind of like denial phase of dealing with this issue has allowed other countries like China to get really far ahead on the green energy game. And this is something that America could have taken hold of as just a huge economic booster, because this is a real issue that needs to be dealt with. Sustainable energy, honestly, is the future. The fact that this is efficient, it's safer, it's lower energy costs. I'm right now paying less for my electric bill that is using a lot of solar power rather than fossil fuels. It just costs me less. It's really effective. This honestly feels like the hysteria we had years ago over efficient light bulbs, and how a lot of conservatives threw up rants. We don't want to switch out our light bulbs. We don't want these woke light bulbs. And then you see massive energy savings over time when you have more efficient light bulbs and now LED light bulbs. So it feels like something that this is just like manufactured. I don't know if it's the tens of millions of dollars that the Koch brothers want to protect their oil money, and it's just the spending that's gone into advertising from them. But this has become a really polarized topic when it just doesn't need to be. It doesn't need to be an austerity thing where we're deindustrializing or hurting people who are already suffering from climate catastrophe by taxing them more or something like that. This is just something that can be like investing in our future and more advanced forms of energy.
Thank you, Socrates. And now on to Matt. What thoughts do you have on Trump's approach to this issue, and why do you believe that it's superior?
Yeah, so I mean, Trump hasn't had like a super sophisticated or calculated plan when it comes to the issue that we have with the climate crisis and everything. And Kamala Harris had proposed a Green New Deal, but then she went back on kind of fracking and the Green New Deal because apparently she didn't find it convincing or good, or she was told something. I do believe that we still need an emphasis on nuclear power as a low carbon solution. I think that's a pretty decent thing. Nuclear energy offers a reliable, scalable type of low carbon power source. I believe that, private sector incentives and research into advanced like nuclear technologies, like small modular reactors, could make nuclear energy even safer and cheaper. In terms of, he said, leading countries like in installed renewable energy capacity worldwide. This is 2023. We are second in the world to China. And in terms of scale, because we always talk about scale, China is a much larger country and they have like 1 billion people. So it's expected that they, kind of do better than us in terms of that. Um, just like they have a larger military, but not a better military, right? So we are second in the world in terms of that. I do believe that we have to make certain adjustments. Climate change is a real thing. It does affect real people, and it, can affect storms and all sorts of hurricanes, floods that we have, and we should definitely do things to mitigate that. And I think as more research comes out, and like nuclear energy is not a bad thing, and carbon capture and natural gas, all of those things, in addition to nuclear, can be a part of like a balanced energy mix. And we just want to find a balance, like neutral ground. I think we have a neutral ground on this, into where we want to make sure people can afford things, and we want to make sure that it's not too much of a burden on the economy for us to tackle climate change, but also tackle it when we can. I think the middle ground's where it's best to meet there.
Thanks, Matt. Socrates, if you want to offer a response to what Matt said, go ahead. You have about a minute.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I have to say I'm extremely heartened to hear that Matt is not coming out saying that climate change is a hoax and it's not real, or if it is real, it's not caused by people, or if it is caused by people, it won't be a problem, or it's China's fault or it's India's fault, and just owning this issue. It's something that Trump has yet to do, to just say this is a problem, we do need to fix it. It is kind of strange to hear somebody who is debating in favor of the par excellence American exceptionalism candidate to say that, well, obviously we're going to be second to China. China's going to beat us. It's just how it is. There's nothing we can do about that. Whatever. It feels really strange to me. There's no reason that America couldn't have been number one in this. The reason it wasn't number one, we're now number two, is because we've had so much, honestly, from the Republican Party, from conservatives, and from Trump, talking about how climate change isn't real. This is a hoax. This is like some liberal woke thing that they're pretending that there's some environmental issue that we have to deal with, and it's going to destroy us if we do try to deal with it. So, I mean, given that you do see that this is a real issue, and Trump has said that it's not a real issue, and we don't have to do anything, and he said that that advanced energy solutions like solar and wind are like bad. Just talking about windmills killing birds and stuff like this, and undermining all these technologies. I don't understand it. Why are you advocating for this?
And Matt, if you'd like to offer a response to that, you've got about 60 seconds.
What? Yeah, I think he's kind of skewing what Trump has actually said about it. And when it comes to being second in the world, you almost acted like we were just second in the world. I think we've been second in the world for a decent amount of time when it comes to renewable energy. And us saying they are bigger than us in terms of China is not like a wrong thing. They are a much larger country with a lot more people and a lot more resources in certain regards. So that is objectively the case. And I agree that this is an issue that we need to tackle in terms of all Americans. But I think what Trump has sort of emphasized is that we don't want to tackle this issue in a way that will hurt the economy and hurt the people, right? That's something we don't want to do. At the same time, I think if we tackle the issue in a way that's not necessarily hurting the people and not hurting, what we're doing in our cause, I think that's fine. As long as we find some sort of middle ground on that, then I think that will be completely okay and fine in terms of all of that. So, yeah.
We appreciate both your guys' perspectives on that. It's always heartening to hear an issue that sometimes divides people, that people can actually agree upon and find common solutions. Moving on, in the past few years, the world has seen an uptick in global conflicts. In fact, the number of armed conflicts that occurred in 2023 was nearly double the same amount in 2013, according to Our World in Data. From Russia and Ukraine to significant conflicts involving Israel and Palestine and Iran, there seems to be no shortage of them. And that doesn't even account for the many brewing geopolitical disputes like Taiwan and China and the Koreas that could seemingly set off at any minute. Once again, both candidates view armed conflicts around the world as a growing threat to America, but they offer different solutions. So, Matt, why do you think Trump will be better at alleviating these issues and promoting peace? Hey, Matt, can you hear us? If you, all right, we'll go ahead and give Socrates, if you want to go ahead and discuss your issues and talk about Harris's plans for this, we'll get Matt back in here in a minute and bring him up to speed.
All right, sounds good. Am I audible? Okay, cool. Okay, cool. Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that Matt was able to hear what I say. Um, yeah, I mean, I think this is again, I've been talking, it feels like a lot now just about these issues that Trump is just too weak to stare directly in the face and actually deal with. So his solution to Ukraine is, well, just let Putin have it. Whatever parts he wants to conquer, just let him do it. Just do appeasement. I don't think that it's a good strategy to kick the can down the road. Oh, Afghanistan, there's some conflict there. Just let the Taliban have it. Just withdraw and leave. I feel like a lot of people forget this, that it was Biden who pulled the trigger on actually engaging the plan to remove us from Afghanistan, but it was Trump who set the timetable. So it's this constant like kicking the can down the road, trying to have some kind of political win, while not actually dealing with the issue, which are in some cases brewing threats, but primarily it's how you deal with those threats. So in Trump's candidacy, we became distant from our allies. Nobody really wanted to deal with us. We were screwing over the Kurds. With the Kamala presidency to come and the Biden presidency that she's been a part of, we've seen a strengthening with our allies. This is really the only way to tackle these massive issues is in a coalition. I'm old enough to remember, not trying to say anything by that, but just, in the early 2000s, seeing the way that the Afghanistan war was waged and the Iraq war was waged, and the way that we started off with a coalition of nations that were working with us to try to make some impact in the world that was positive, and then seeing the way that people started to look at America as this monster. And so I am happy of the kind of newer conservative shift toward not being hawkish, toward saying we should avoid conflict. I really appreciate that. I think that's wonderful. But I think it's also important to keep in mind what our history has been. And it's been conservatives for the last 80 years who have been propagating a Red Scare, anti-Marxist, anti-communist, and saying that the Russians are enemies. And now they want to look at, people on the left as you're, some kind of Russophobe. And it was George Bush, who was a neocon, who got us into these massive wars that we were in for decades and destroyed the goodwill and the coalitions that we had with our allies. So I think that's the biggest thing. There's a lot of things that we need to deal with, but we need to do that with our allies together, and we need somebody who can pull people together rather than destroy those alliances and pull people apart, which is unfortunately who Trump is, just in every way. Pence doesn't like him. There's a reason he's not with his running mate, is that he destroys every kind of relationship he's with. Most of the people who are in his cabinet aren't supporting him, or they're actively saying, don't vote for him. He's a fascist. These are just, generals who have worked with him. So I think that says a lot. I hope I didn't go over my time there. I'm not sure if we're still on schedule.
Oh, we're all good. I gave you a few extra seconds due to a few glitches. Matt, did you catch the gist of that before I let you have your 2 minutes?
Yeah, so I did. I did get bugged out, which is why I didn't go when I was supposed to go, and I had to reload my page. And yeah, I got everything he said. I'll just touch upon his points if I can now. Great. Yeah. So the first thing that I think he said was strength with our allies. I think we have been pretty strong in terms of our allies, but that's not the main issue. The main issue is that we have problems with our enemies. Strength with our allies has something that we've kind of had since NATO, right? The North Atlantic Treaty Organization. But in terms of strength with our allies, we've had that. It's just that we have enemies like Russia and we have things like North Korea and stuff like that. And to Russia, Russia has been communist since the Soviet Union, so that's not what we're worried about anymore. We're worried about like modern things. And yeah, George Bush did like he was a geopolitical liberal in geopolitical theory, so he did wage war a decent amount of times. Although he was a Republican, he was still a geopolitical liberal. And you said pull people apart, quote unquote, when you were giving your talk about geopolitics. Well, Donald Trump in 2018 actually met with Kim Jong-un at the DMZ, which no president really has done. He actually crossed the DMZ with Kim Jong-un and actually signed a denuclearization treaty. Now, the purpose was not truly to denuclearize, but to calm North Korea down. According to most analysts that have been studying North Korea, they said that it's closest to war that it's been since the 1950s. North Korea has been waging war. They've been, doing all sorts of petty stuff like launching artillery at South Korean islands. They've been giving millions of shells to Russia. They've also sent special operation troops into Russia to help with the whole Kursk incursion that's happened. So in terms of what's been going on under the Biden-Harris administration, it's been really, really bad under them. Iran's exports also jumped up significantly. And I don't have the graph to show you, although I can see it myself here. So in 2020, it was 404.489. And now it is 1,322.634. Right. So they've jumped up significantly and have become a lot more in terms like rich. When people look and talk about our axes, they will say that it is Iran, North Korea, maybe Palestine, if Palestine even counts, and Russia. Right. Sure, that's the case. Iran usually about 60% of their exports goes to China. So they've been exporting a lot more. There's been a lot less regulations in terms of Iran, which has been able to allow them to fund things like Hamas, Hezbollah, and all of the other terrorists waging war against the state of Israel, which has its complete and utter right to exist. So all of those things have been happening under, Biden-Harris administration, which you so love.
Thanks for those points, Matt. And Socrates, you have a minute to respond.
Yeah, thank you so much for reminding me about Iran. I maybe would have forgotten about that. It's maybe one of the worst things in terms of foreign policy and in terms of conflict, and in terms of denuclearization and reducing the threat of nuclear war, which is, in addition to climate change, which Trump said was no big deal or why worry about it. The fact is, Trump pulled out of the Iran nuclear deal and has since been enriching their uranium stock. So this was a deal that allowed us to actually, on the ground, keep track of what Iran was doing, making sure that they weren't using any fissile material for weapons purposes, but just for energy. And at the same time, we were potentially normalizing relationships with Iran a little bit, potentially making them less radical. And exactly as I was saying, this idea of tearing us apart. So Trump's plan was basically just to, put a lid on it, hope the problem doesn't grow any worse, and then go over, as my fellow debater said, over to North Korea, and then salute a military dictator from another nation. So he's not serious on foreign policy. When we're talking about dealing with threats, I think it was General John Kelly, who said that Trump is a fascist through and through. He's not a serious person. He doesn't understand what's happening in briefings. Everything is about him. He's a total narcissist. He doesn't have any concept of what it means to have an oath to the Constitution or any kind of goodwill toward the nation or feeling of wanting to make the nation a better place. It's all about him. And he's not the only general who said that. And Trump is a president who's talked about how, openly, he talked about how he didn't like McCain. He's not a real war hero because he was captured and tortured so bad that he couldn't raise his arms. And then in private, he was saying that people who died in wars, who were soldiers, are losers. So I don't think this is the person we want leading us in any kind of conflict.
Thank you, Socrates. We gave you a little extra time, about 90 seconds. So we're going to give Matt the same 90 seconds to respond.
Great. It seemed that he spent the majority of those 90 seconds kind of attacking Trump's personality and not talking about what Biden and Harris are actually going to do in terms of maintaining peace in the Middle East and North Korea. So saluting or shaking hands with a North Korean general. And he's not a dictator. He's just a military general that's part of the Kim dynasty regime. Now, in terms of that, that's actually a very intelligent, brilliant thing to do, because in terms of North Korea, we're trying to keep them stable. There are 12 million inhabitants of Seoul who are in fear of immediate nuclear war, nuclear escalation, and being killed. There are about 26,000 U.S. troops currently in South Korea because of that. Okay, so when we shake hands with North Korean generals, it's to keep peace. North Korea has not been able to be invaded since the Korean War. They've maintained a strong military, and they're very militaristic. And they've completely militarized even their women, their men, and they teach young boys that the U.S. is enemy number one. So keeping peace with a country like that is great. Given the fact that everything we know about North Korea in terms of their bioweapons or technology makes them uninvadable, the best strategy, or uninvadable unless we want like total destruction of the world, the best strategy is hope for a domestic revolution in North Korea. So shaking hands with leaders, keeping peace is the best thing ever, which is why we don't have them sending millions of shells to Russia or sending, special operation troops in terms of Ukraine. I wish we had more time to talk about Ukraine specifically, which I think is a really great thing to talk about, but I don't think we have time to talk about that. Apart from that, you just talked about Trump's personality and what people have said about them. I don't really care what people say about Trump necessarily. I care what Trump's actions are and what he actually accomplishes in terms of geopolitics. And yeah, Iran's exports did become a lot more. They were able to support the Houthis in Yemen, which also messed up global supplies, which also kind of increased prices for almost everyone, which we had to do something about. That's all happening under the Biden-Harris administration, which they don't seem competent, because where was their meetup with Kim Jong-un? Where was their talk with Russian President Vladimir Putin? What have they been doing in the Middle East? Not a lot, right? Which results in all of the great stuff that have been happening recently. So I don't know if apart from talking about Trump, it doesn't seem like you can attack his great geopolitical strategy, which he had North Korea calm, Russia tamed, and stuff like that.
We're supposed to move on to closing arguments, but Socrates, I'm going to give you 30 seconds to address that and wrap it up.
Sure. So we just heard about how the result of pulling out of the Iran nuclear deal led to them arming the Houthis. That was Trump doing that. Even though it happened during Biden's presidency, this is something that Trump did. We heard about how saluting a military leader, but somehow Kim Jong-un isn't a dictator. Are we going to hear that Putin is also not a dictator? I'm kind of curious what we're going to hear next, maybe in closing remarks. But I think it's a good place to cut it there.
Yeah, that sounds good to us, Socrates. And before we get on to the closing arguments, we've now reached the most exciting part of our night, at least for me, audience voting. We want all of you, our viewers, to give your thoughts on who presented the most compelling arguments for their candidate tonight. So tell us in the chat with #PoliticsDebate. Were you more convinced by Socrates or Matt Nuclear? The winner will get a special prize, so choose carefully. And lastly, we want to give each of our creators a chance to offer their closing thoughts on the topics we discussed tonight and anything they want to say on the upcoming election Tuesday. We're running slightly late, so we're going to keep that to about 3 minutes. And Socrates, since you went second for our intro at the start of the debate, you're up. You have about 3 minutes.
All right, thank you so much. Once again, thank you for welcoming me to this debate. I'm really excited to be here on the politics platform. I'm currently streaming on Twitch, but I will try out some streams on Politics TV. It feels like when we're talking about Kamala and Biden versus Trump, it feels like it really is hard to understand what's happening in the mind of an undecided voter who isn't really sure what the differences are between these things. If we want to put it really bluntly, Kamala lives in reality, lives in the world of seeing problems and dealing with problems and dealing with real problems and dealing with practical solutions to problems. Trump deals in this kind of um, netherworld of oh, the main problems are the deep state who's out to get me, and Putin is my only friend. I don't trust our own intelligence agencies. The enemy is within, and we need to turn the military against the threat within America. And I want to be a dictator, and I want to suspend the Constitution. And he's quoting from yes, Hitler's speeches and Mein Kampf. And then on the side for like, oh, what's wrong with Kamala? It's like, well, maybe she's being a little harsh in her rhetoric about how much Trump is a fascist. The fact is, Kamala has real plans versus Trump has concepts of a plan. So Kamala has real plans to increase our productivity by investing in small businesses with tax rebates. She has plans to solve the housing crisis by producing tax credits on the supply side for building housing, including affordable housing, and the demand side for making it so that people can get over that hump to get to buying a first house, who don't have the capital saved up, getting a credit to buy a house for the first time. These are two of the biggest issues that people are facing on a regular basis. Is actually generating jobs, generating wealth, and being able to build equity for your family. And then at the same time, it's increasing child tax credit so that more people can actually buy a home. It seemed like my debate opponent said that child tax credits were good actually, and Trump wants to do that, while at the same time saying that all of these have been reviewed by economists and they're terrible policies and they'll tank the economy. The fact is, Trump wants to dismantle our country and sell it off to the highest bidder. He wants to sell off our educational systems. He wants to give massive tax credits to people who are making money that they just don't need more of to get by or to do anything with. They aren't going to invest in the economy. The idea that somebody has money so they should have more money. If somebody works in this country, they raise a family in this country, they should be able to live in this country. They should be able to send their kids to school. They should be able to have their kids taken care of and fed. These are really basic ideas. If you want to call that communist, if you want to call it communist to have a tax credit to start a small business, then that's fine. You can do that. But once again, this is living in this kind of nether zone of these dark forces that we have to fight against rather than dealing with things practically as they are. And I'll just leave it there.
Thanks, Socrates. Next up, Matt, we'd love to hear your closing arguments. We'll give you about 3.5 minutes since Socrates got that much.
First of all, I want to thank you and everyone who's welcomed me to have this conversation. I want to thank my opponent also for being here. So yeah, I want to just clarify one thing. He saluted the military commander, so he's not the dictator. Kim Jong-un's the dictator, just to clarify that. You spent the majority of the time talking about, Trump's personality, calling him a fascist, saying he's Hitler, Mein Kampf, all of those things, which is really divisive towards our country. And I don't think we need to be more divisive than we already are, which it seems like you kind of are being, man. Okay. You battered Trump's character. And by the way, the bad economic plans were not the tax credit. It was the whole plan on housing by giving everyone money on an already constrained market, and the price gouging thing. So people from the economic departments, I'm pretty sure we have Stanford, people in the Stanford economic department. We had 2 professors come out and saying the price gouging thing doesn't even make sense. And it became a lot worse when it's only for emergency situations, which is pretty weird. I mean, how's that going to help the Chris guy who was at that town hall, right? It seemed really silly. And also, we don't just tax the rich. I mean, it's not like we have to just let the rich have all of the money, right? Everyone gets taxed. They make a lot more, which is why they're taxed more, which is why we actually get a lot more of their tax dollars. It's really simple mathematics. And you say they don't like they just work and are rich. Well, they contribute 97.3% of federal income tax. So like, do we just get rid of all the rich people and have all the broke people pay taxes? It's like, I mean, I don't want to call people communist or whatever, but I'll say you're probably more on the socialist side, because that doesn't make any sense. When they contribute 97.3% of federal income tax, which is how the federal government makes money, why should we just like stop giving them cuts at all? Then why would people want to be rich? It's like, that doesn't really like seem to make any logic. In terms of the tax credit, that's a good economic plan. I think we should incentivize families. We have a fertility problem here in the United States, where we do need immigrants. It's funny, I thought we were going to talk about immigration, but we haven't got a chance to. But yeah, we do need more immigration in this country, and more people who do come in vetted through a secure net and a secure process, where they're not like people who were like murderers and come in and kill someone, which has happened a few times. So we need a better background system as well, so we can get more immigrants, and then we can have more people in this country contribute also to like federal tax revenue and stuff, because immigrants are going to be the source of all U.S. population growth by 2042. And they're also going to add $1 trillion to U.S. federal tax revenue by, I think, the next decade, which is going to be really good for us all. So I don't get the whole 97.3% of people that contribute to federal income tax being like disregarded. Because if you just leave them all behind, then you just have the people in the middle class, right? It's like kind of like a weird strategy. Apart from that, I think secure border. I think in terms of everything that we've already talked about, Trump obviously has a better plan, had better geopolitics, had a better economy. And you don't have to ask me or any debater. You can simply ask the American people, because that's what they said. They said that they felt the economy was much better under Donald J. Trump. And we also have someone like Kamala Harris, who doesn't seem to be able to answer questions, doesn't seem to be able to really address the issues, and has these plans which are really not good. And she also has like these plans that she kind of brings up out of nowhere, like the whole 5-point plan for black men after black men were not voting for her. That's kind of weird and seems pretty disingenuous. But apart from that, I think I've touched on every topic, and I'm glad you came here. I'm also glad that I was called on here to debate, and I think we had a good conversation. Well, yeah, a good debate.
Very nice ending, Matt. Well, I wanted to thank both you guys for coming on tonight on behalf of the entire politics team and our viewers and our production guy, Avi. We think both of you debated excellently, and we'd happily have either of you on again. And I wanted to give a thank you to our audience members as well, for those who joined us to just view or chatted or gave their opinion on who won. And without further ado, we're happy to announce that, in fact, tonight's vote was a tie with 12 total votes. Technically, both of you are our winners. So clearly, you both presented some very compelling arguments. So we'll go ahead and pool the winner and loser prize together, and we'll split that up amongst the two of you. And maybe we'll have to do another one to see if we can determine a true winner. But I think everybody who was watching tonight gained some really valuable insight from this conversation. And lastly, don't forget that the election is in just 2 short days. If you haven't voted, make sure to go do so on election day, because early voting is closed in almost every state, I believe. And then once you've voted, make sure to come back to us for election night, starting at 7 p.m. Eastern, for our special left, right, center politics election coverage. And our creators will be covering what happens all throughout the week after too, because this is shaking up to be potentially the longest election decision in recent history. And I wanted to thank everyone for joining, especially Socrates and Matt, and everyone for joining and engaging with us. And with that, we apologize for running a few minutes over, but we think it was worth it. So thanks for joining, and good night.